Don't expect a single penny from Dad's 92 million inch, my son Robert sneered as I walked into the room. He did not even look up from his phone. His wife Sarah did not even offer me a seat. Instead, she whispered loud enough for the whole room to hear, "She is still breathing. I thought she would be gone by now. Maybe we should check her pulse before the lawyer starts reading." I stood there still smelling the funeral roses on my black dress, watching my own family circle my life like vultures around a carcass. They were already walking through the house, slapping neon owner stickers on the grandfather clock, the wedding china, and the leather armchairs. They saw me as a ghost. A fading shadow in a house they were already planning to gut for a spa room. But they forgot one thing. I was not a ghost yet. And I was the only one who knew where the foundation of this empire was actually buried. Before I continue, please subscribe, like, share, and comment from where you are watching this story and what time it is in your country right now. I always love reading your messages and hearing where my stories reach around the world. The funeral had ended only 2 hours earlier. My husband Arthur had been buried under gray skies and cold wind. 47 years of marriage had been lowered into the ground while our son worried more about stock accounts than his father. The moment the last guest left the cemetery, Robert became a different man. At the house, he loosened his tie, opened a bottle of expensive whiskey, and laughed with Sarah in the living room while I still sat quietly holding Arthur's folded scarf in my hands. I remember staring at the family photos hanging on the wall. There was one from Robert's graduation day. Arthur stood proudly beside him, smiling like he had conquered the world. I stood at the edge of the picture, half hidden behind both of them. That was my life. Always there but never fully seen. Sarah walked past me carrying a tray of champagne glasses. She looked at me with fake sympathy and forced a smile. "You should rest, Evelyn," she said. "You look exhausted." I nodded softly because arguing with her was useless. She only respected people with money and power. And she believed I had neither. An hour later, Robert came upstairs while I was folding Arthur's clothes. He leaned against the doorway with his arms crossed. "We are going to make some changes around the house," he said casually. "Sarah and I need more space for the kids when they visit." I looked at him slowly. "The kids barely come here." "They will," he answered quickly. "Anyway, we thought it would be best if you moved downstairs." "Downstairs where?" "The utility room." I thought I had heard him wrong. "The utility room. It is temporary, Mom. Just until we renovate the upstairs." I stared at my own son, unable to speak for a moment. The utility room was smaller than most closets. It sat beside the laundry machines and smelled like bleach and dust. "Your father was buried today," I whispered. Robert sighed loudly like I was being difficult. "Please do not make this emotional. We are all stressed right now." All stressed. Those words cut deeper than he knew. I spent the next hour carrying my own blankets downstairs while Sarah directed movers through the hallway. "Careful with that lamp," she shouted. "That one is probably worth 10 grand. Not once did she ask if I needed help. By evening, I was sitting on a thin cot beside a mop bucket, listening to laughter echo through the vents above me. They were celebrating already. I could hear music, glasses clinking, and Sarah bragging about turning the upstairs study into a luxury spa room. Robert laughed and said Dad would have wanted us to enjoy the house. Then Sarah answered with the sentence that stayed in my chest like poison. She built soup while Arthur built an empire. The room exploded with laughter. I sat very still, staring at the flickering bulb above my head. Soup. That was all they thought I had contributed to this family. Meals, laundry, birthday parties, school pickups, holiday decorations. Invisible work. Endless work. I closed my eyes and remembered the nights Arthur used to come home terrified because the company was collapsing. Back then Robert was in college spending money we did not have. The company had loans stacked on loans. Arthur barely slept. Some nights I found him sitting alone at the kitchen table with tears in his eyes. One night he whispered, "We are finished, Evelyn. Everything is gone." I remember placing my hand over his and saying, "No, it is not." At that time I still had my jewelry collection. Family pieces passed down through generations. Emerald earrings from my mother. A diamond brooch from my grandmother. Gold bangles Arthur gave me on our 10th anniversary. Every piece carried memories. And I sold all of them. Quietly. No one knew. Not Robert. Not the board members. Not even our closest friends. I sat alone in a jewelry office while strangers weighed pieces of my life on little black scales. "How soon can you transfer the money?" I asked the dealer. "By tomorrow morning," he answered. I nodded even though my chest felt hollow. That money kept the company alive long enough for me to create something bigger. The truth is, Arthur was brilliant with people but terrible with strategy. He could inspire a room, but he could not save the business. So every night after he fell asleep I sat at the kitchen table writing plans. Expansion ideas. Investment structures. Market projections. I studied reports until sunrise while the rest of the house slept. One night I created the model that changed everything. The IPO expansion strategy. The plan that later made headlines across the country. The plan people still teach in business schools. But I knew nobody would take it seriously if it came from a housewife in her 50s. So I created a fake name. M.A. Thorne. I mailed the proposal anonymously to Arthur's office. 3 days later he burst through the front door with tears in his eyes. "We are saved," he shouted. I still remember how tightly he hugged me. He never asked if it was mine. Maybe part of him knew. Maybe part of him was afraid to know. From upstairs I suddenly heard Sarah shouting excitedly, "Oh my God, Robert, come look at this wine cellar." Their laughter filled the ceiling above me. I slowly reached into my sweater pocket and touched the folded document hidden inside. The original contract. The one proving who truly owned the strategy. The one Arthur made me promise to protect. Because near the end of his life he finally saw what our son had become. And before he died he made arrangements neither Robert nor Sarah could imagine. I leaned back against the cold wall and smiled for the first time all day. They thought I was weak. They thought I was fading. But storms look quiet before they destroy everything. The next morning I woke before sunrise to the sound of footsteps above my head. For a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then the smell of detergent and cold concrete reminded me. The utility room. My back ached from the thin cot. My hands felt stiff from the cold air drifting through the basement walls. I sat up slowly and looked at the small clock near the washing machine. 5:30 in the morning. For 47 years I had been the first person awake in that house. I used to make coffee for Arthur before his meetings. I packed Robert's lunches when he was little. I ironed uniforms, baked birthday cakes, and stayed awake through fevers and nightmares. Now I was hidden underground like something embarrassing. I quietly folded my blanket and climbed the basement stairs. The house was silent except for the humming refrigerator in the kitchen. When I stepped inside I froze. Sticky notes covered almost every cabinet. Sarah's handwriting. Remove this shelf. Coffee station here. Wine fridge installation. I walked toward the dining room and saw more notes stuck to the walls. Mirror for selfies. Open this space. Replace old furniture. Old furniture. The table Arthur built with his own hands 30 years earlier was now old furniture. I touched the edge of the wood, gently remembering Christmas dinners, birthday candles, and late-night talks after Robert had gone to sleep. Then Sarah's voice startled me. "You are up early." I turned and saw her standing in the doorway wearing a silk robe while scrolling through her phone. "I was going to make tea," I said softly. She walked to the expensive coffee machine and pressed a button. "Oh, by the way," she said casually, "Robert and I are hosting a small dinner tonight." "A dinner?" "Yes. Just some investors and friends. We want to discuss the future of the company." "The future? Already? It may be better if you stay downstairs while guests are here," she added. "People get uncomfortable around grief." I looked at her face carefully. There was no kindness there. No shame either. Only irritation. As if my existence interrupted the luxury life she imagined for herself. She poured coffee into a white cup and leaned against the counter. "You know, Evelyn," she said, "Robert has worked very hard for this company." I almost laughed. Worked hard. Robert spent most of his 20s crashing sports cars and disappearing into nightclubs while Arthur and I fought to keep the business alive. But I stayed quiet. Sarah continued speaking. "He deserves his moment now. Arthur always protected him from responsibility, but Robert is finally ready to lead." I nodded slowly. "Does Robert believe that too?" She smiled proudly. "He believes this company was built for him." Built for him. Those words echoed in my head long after she walked away. Around noon, I went upstairs to Arthur's old office for the first time since the funeral. The room still smelled like his cologne and leather books. Sunlight streamed through the large windows across the polished desk. I ran my fingers along the shelf slowly. Photos. Awards. Business magazines with Arthur's face on the cover. One framed article read, "The visionary behind America's biggest financial comeback." I stared at the picture for a long moment. Arthur smiling confidently in a navy suit while the world praised him for ideas that were born at my kitchen table. I should have hated him for that. But love is complicated. Arthur did love me in his own broken way. He trusted me more than anyone. He relied on me. But he also allowed the world to erase me because it was easier. And I allowed it too. That was my mistake. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk and found something unexpected. A sealed envelope with my name written in Arthur's handwriting. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a letter. "Evelyn. If you are reading this, then I am gone and I failed to protect you from what Robert may become. I spent too many years confusing love with weakness. I gave him comfort when I should have given him character. There are truths I should have spoken earlier. You built this family. You built this company. Without you, there would have been nothing left of me to bury. I know you never wanted recognition, but you deserved it every single day. Forgive me for waiting too long to say it. Everything is prepared. Trust Sterling. Arthur." I closed my eyes tightly, holding the paper against my chest. For a moment the room blurred through tears. Arthur knew. Maybe he always knew. Maybe every silent glance across the dinner table carried the truth between us. Suddenly loud voices downstairs broke the silence. I quickly wiped my face and walked into the hallway. Robert and two men in suits stood near the staircase discussing renovations. "We can convert this side into private executive suites," Robert said confidently. "The property value alone is insane." One of the men noticed me. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Whitmore," he said politely. Before I could answer, Robert interrupted. My mother is not involved in company matters anymore. Not involved. The word stung more than I expected. The men nodded awkwardly while Robert guided them toward the study. As they walked away, I heard him laugh. She still thinks the fax machine is high-tech. More laughter. I stood there silently while anger slowly burned through years of patience. That evening the house transformed into a party. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Expensive perfume filled the air. Waiters carried trays of champagne through rooms still holding funeral flowers. I stayed downstairs exactly where they wanted me. Hidden. Forgotten. But from the basement vent I could hear everything. Robert gave speeches upstairs pretending to be a powerful businessman. The company is entering a bold new era, he announced proudly. People applauded. Sarah bragged about future projects and luxury expansions. Then someone asked a question that made the room quiet. What will happen to your mother? There was a pause. Then Robert laughed lightly. We will make sure she is comfortable. Comfortable. Like I was some old pet nearing the end. Another guest asked, will she remain in the house? Sarah answered this time. We are considering assisted living options. Somewhere peaceful. I closed my eyes slowly. Assisted living. They had already planned my removal from the house before Arthur's will was even read. Then came the moment that changed something inside me forever. A man upstairs asked Robert, did your father leave clear ownership instructions? Robert chuckled confidently. Everything naturally passes to me. Dad trusted family. Family. I reached into my pocket and touched the folded document again. The real ownership papers. The hidden agreements. The signatures nobody knew existed. At that exact moment my phone vibrated softly. Unknown number. I answered quietly. Hello. A calm, familiar voice spoke. Mrs. Whitmore. This is Sterling. Arthur's lawyer. My heart tightened slightly. I hope to speak privately before tomorrow's reading, he said carefully. There are developments your son does not know about. I glanced toward the basement ceiling, hearing laughter continue above me. What kind of developments? There was a short silence. Then Mr. Sterling spoke words that made my entire body still. Your husband changed the will 6 months ago. Completely. Upstairs champagne glasses clinked while downstairs my world shifted. What do you mean completely? I whispered. It means Robert is expecting an inheritance that may no longer belong to him. I slowly sat down on the edge of the cot. And there is something else, Mrs. Whitmore, he continued. Arthur left specific instructions regarding the company origins and the identity of M.A. Thorne. For the first time in years, fear entered my chest. Not fear of losing. Fear of finally being seen. Mr. Sterling lowered his voice. Tomorrow will not be an ordinary reading. I strongly advise you to prepare yourself. The call ended. Above me the party grew louder. Music. Laughter. Boasting. Meanwhile, I sat alone in the dim basement holding Arthur's letter in one hand and the hidden documents in the other. Robert thought tomorrow would crown him king. But kingdoms built on disrespect collapse fast. And by this time tomorrow the empire they celebrated upstairs would no longer belong to them. The morning of the will reading arrived cold and gray. Rain tapped softly against the windows while the house carried the strange silence that follows a storm. Upstairs I could hear Sarah giving orders to the staff while Robert practiced confident speeches in the mirror. I stayed downstairs a little longer holding a warm cup of tea between my hands. For the first time in years I was not afraid of what came next. At exactly 9:30, a black car pulled into the driveway. Through the basement window, I recognized Mr. Sterling stepping out with his leather briefcase in one hand. The moment Robert saw him, he practically ran to the front door. "Sterling, good to see you," Robert said loudly. His voice carried through the house. I slowly climbed the stairs and entered the hallway just as Sarah kissed Mr. Sterling on the cheek, pretending they were old friends. "Coffee?" she offered sweetly. "No thank you," he answered calmly. His eyes found mine across the room. There was something serious in his expression. Something heavy. Robert noticed the glance and quickly stepped between us. "Mom probably needs help sitting down," he said casually. I looked at my son for a long moment. He truly believed I was weak now. Fragile. Confused. I simply nodded and walked toward the dining room without another word. The long table had been prepared like a business meeting. Bottled water, legal papers, and silver pens sat neatly arranged under the chandelier. Robert took the seat at the head of the table before anyone else could. Sarah sat beside him, already smiling like victory belonged to her. I quietly chose a chair near the end. Mr. Sterling opened his briefcase slowly and removed several folders. "Before we begin," he said, "I must remind everyone that Arthur Whitmore personally revised this will 6 months before his death." Robert smiled confidently. "That makes sense. Dad and I discussed succession many times." Mr. Sterling did not respond. Instead, he unfolded a pair of glasses and opened the first document. "The estate includes liquid assets, business holdings, investment accounts, real estate properties, and intellectual property rights with an estimated value exceeding $92 million. Sarah squeezed Robert's arm excitedly. I remained still. Then Mr. Sterling continued. "However, Arthur Whitmore attached several conditional clauses to the inheritance." Robert's smile faded slightly. "What kind of clauses?" Mr. Sterling looked directly at him. "Behavioral clauses." Silence settled across the room. Robert laughed nervously. "Dad always loved dramatic lawyer language." Mr. Sterling ignored the comment. He pressed a button on a small recording device sitting beside the papers. Arthur's voice suddenly filled the room. Weak. Older. But clear. "If my son Robert ever humiliates, insults, neglects, or verbally abuses his mother following my death, then financial penalties will apply immediately." Robert straightened in his chair. "What is this?" Arthur's voice continued. "Every disrespectful statement toward Evelyn Whitmore will result in a $1 million deduction from Robert Whitmore's inheritance." Sarah blinked rapidly. Robert looked stunned. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. Mr. Sterling calmly removed another folder. Arthur authorized full review of household security recordings captured after his death. Robert's face lost color. Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses. "I will now read several verified statements." My heart remained steady while Robert shifted uncomfortably beside Sarah. Mr. Sterling began reading. "She is still breathing. I thought she would be gone by now. $1 million deducted." Robert stared at Sarah slowly. She looked horrified. Mr. Sterling continued. "She built soup while Arthur built an empire. $1 million deducted." Sarah whispered, "Oh my God." Mr. Sterling kept reading. "Maybe we should move her to the shed. $1 million deducted." "She does not even know what year it is. $1 million deducted." Robert slammed his hand against the table. "This is insane." Mr. Sterling calmly lifted another page. "There are 88 verified statements." The room went completely silent. Sarah's mouth slowly opened in disbelief. Robert looked like he could not breathe. Mr. Sterling spoke clearly. Total deductions equal $88 million. Robert stood up so quickly his chair crashed backward. No. Absolutely not. This cannot be legal. It is entirely legal, Mr. Sterling answered. You manipulated this. I simply followed Arthur's instructions. Robert turned toward me with fury burning in his eyes. You knew about this. I looked at him quietly. No, Robert. I hoped you would remember how to be human before it mattered. Sarah suddenly exploded. This old woman trapped us. Mr. Sterling immediately raised his hand. Additional verbal abuse during the reading also qualifies under Clause 7. Sarah instantly covered her mouth. Robert looked ready to collapse. How much is left? He whispered. Mr. Sterling checked the documents calmly. $3,000. The silence afterward felt endless. $92 million reduced to almost nothing. I watched my son sink slowly back into his chair, staring blankly at the table. For the first time in his life, Robert looked small. Not powerful. Not important. Just small. Then Mr. Sterling reached for another folder. And now we must address the matter of company ownership. Robert lifted his head slightly. The company belongs to me. Mr. Sterling met his eyes evenly. No, Robert. It does not. The room froze again. What are you talking about? Mr. Sterling opened the folder carefully. 15 years ago, during the company financial crisis, an anonymous strategist operating under the name M.A. Thorne submitted the IPO expansion model responsible for the company's survival and future growth. Robert nodded impatiently. Yes, everyone knows that story. What you do not know is that Arthur Whitmore privately investigated the identity of M.A. Thorne before his death. I felt Sarah staring at me now. Confused. Nervous. Mr. Sterling continued. Handwriting analysis, draft comparisons, bank transfers, and intellectual property records confirmed that M.A. Thorne was not an outside consultant. Robert frowned. Then who was it? Mr. Sterling slowly turned toward me. Evelyn Whitmore. The air vanished from the room. Robert stared at me like he had never seen me before. Sarah whispered no. Mr. Sterling calmly continued speaking. The IPO model patents and all connected royalty structures legally belong to Evelyn Whitmore as the original creator. Robert shook his head violently. That is impossible. My mother barely used email. I almost smiled at that. Mr. Sterling slid several documents across the table. Arthur protected her identity for years according to her wishes. However, 6 months ago, he transferred full legal recognition and ownership rights back to Mrs. Whitmore. Robert grabbed the papers, desperately scanning signatures and legal seals. This has to be fake. It has already been verified in court. Sarah looked at me with complete disbelief. You created the company. I finally spoke after sitting silent for almost the entire meeting. No, Sarah. I saved it. The room fell quiet again. I looked around the mansion slowly. The chandelier. The marble floors. The expensive paintings. Every luxury they loved existed because of sacrifices they never bothered to ask about. Robert suddenly looked furious again. You let Dad take credit all these years. Yes. Why? Because I loved him. Robert stared at me, unable to answer. Then I added softly, but love should never require disappearing. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Mr. Sterling delivered the final blow. Due to ownership restructuring, all residential property rights, including this mansion, now belong solely to Evelyn Whitmore. Sarah's face drained completely. What does that mean? It means, Mr. Sterling answered calmly, you no longer own or control this residence. Robert stood again. This is my house. I looked directly into his eyes for the first time that morning. No, Robert. It never was. Outside, thunder rolled across the gray sky while silence swallowed the room whole. And for the first time in decades, I no longer felt invisible. Robert did not speak for several seconds. It was as if the words had not reached his mind yet. His eyes kept moving from the documents to me to Mr. Sterling and back again. Then suddenly he laughed. A short broken laugh that sounded nothing like confidence. This is some kind of joke, he said loudly. You cannot just erase someone from their own life. Sarah stood beside him now, gripping the edge of the table. This is insane. We are being tricked. Mr. Sterling did not react. He simply closed one file and opened another. There is nothing to trick. Everything has been verified through legal authority, court certification, and independent forensic review. Robert slammed his palm on the table. I am the son. I am the heir. This house, this company, everything belongs to me. For the first time I stood up slowly. My chair made a soft sound against the floor. All eyes turned toward me. I felt something inside me settle. Not anger. Not fear. Just clarity. Robert, I said calmly. He looked at me like he was waiting for me to apologize. You are the son, I continued. But being born into something does not mean you understand how it was built. Sarah scoffed. You are still pretending you built something. You were just a housewife. The words used to hurt me. Years ago they would have broken me. But not anymore. I turned slightly toward her. I was a housewife who kept this company alive when it was drowning in debt. I was a wife who sold everything she owned so your life could exist. I was the mind behind the strategy that made your lifestyle possible. Sarah rolled her eyes. That is not how business works. Mr. Sterling interrupted her quietly. It is exactly how this business works. And legally it is how ownership is defined. Robert suddenly walked around the table toward me. His voice lowered but filled with rage. So what now? You take everything. You throw your own son out. I looked at him for a long moment. I am not throwing you out, Robert. Your choices already did that. He froze. For a second something almost human flickered in his face. Something lost and confused. But it disappeared quickly. This is because of Dad, he said sharply. He poisoned you against me with this nonsense. I shook my head slowly. No. Your father protected me from you. There is a difference. Silence filled the room again. Even Sarah did not speak. Mr. Sterling then placed one final envelope on the table. There is one more instruction from Arthur Whitmore. Robert laughed bitterly. Of course there is. Mr. Sterling ignored him. This instruction was to be read only after full ownership confirmation. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single letter. Arthur's handwriting. Mr. Sterling began reading. Robert. If you are hearing this, then you have reached the point where truth can no longer be avoided. You were never denied success. You were protected from responsibility for too long. I made that mistake because I confused providing comfort with providing character. But there is something you must understand. Everything you believed you inherited was never truly yours. It was built on the unseen strength of your mother. She did not just support this family. She held it together when it was falling apart. If you fail to recognize that, then you will lose more than money. You will lose every foundation you stand on. Respect her. Or lose everything. Arthur Whitmore. The room stayed silent after the reading. Robert did not move. Sarah slowly sat back down like her legs could no longer support her. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. For a brief moment I thought Robert might finally understand. But then he shook his head. No. This is manipulation. Even from the grave he is controlling everything. Mr. Sterling closed the letter. That concludes all instructions. Robert suddenly turned away and walked toward the window. He stood there staring outside as rain hit the glass. You are destroying this family, he said without turning back. I answered softly. This family destroyed itself a long time ago. I am only revealing what was already broken. Sarah stood up again. Her voice shook now. If this is real, then where are we supposed to go? I looked at her. For the first time she looked afraid instead of arrogant. You will leave the house, I said. Robert spun around instantly. No. Yes, Mr. Sterling confirmed. Ownership transfer is immediate. Robert walked back toward me again, his voice rising. You cannot do this. I am your son. I felt something heavy in my chest at those words. Yes. He was my son. But I had already spent too many years being treated like I was nothing. I gave you everything, Robert, I said quietly. And you gave me disrespect in return. Sarah grabbed Robert's arm. We need lawyers. We need to fight this. Mr. Sterling responded calmly. You are welcome to challenge it in court. But you will lose. The documentation is airtight. Robert stared at him for a long moment. Then suddenly he turned back toward me. His voice dropped. Mom, please. Just tell him to stop this. That was the first time he had called me Mom in that tone in years. Not demanding. Not mocking. Just desperate. For a second I almost felt weak. Almost. But then I remembered the utility room. The humiliation. The laughter. The years of being invisible in my own life. I am not stopping anything, Robert, I said gently. This is already decided. Silence returned again. Then Sarah suddenly spoke. This is because of that letter, isn't it? You planned this with him. I looked at her. No, Sarah. Your actions wrote this ending. Not mine. Outside the rain grew heavier. The mansion that once felt like a kingdom now felt like a courtroom. A place where truth had finally caught up. Mr. Sterling began organizing the documents into his briefcase. There is one final administrative step, he said. Robert did not respond. Sarah was still sitting frozen. Mr. Sterling looked at me. Mrs. Whitmore, you now have full authority to decide immediate occupancy terms. I paused for a moment. Then I spoke clearly. They have 24 hours. Robert turned sharply. What? You heard me. This is my home. No, I said firmly. It is mine. And I choose peace over conflict inside it. For a moment nobody spoke. Then I turned away from the table and walked toward the hallway. My footsteps echoed through the large empty space. For the first time I was not walking as a shadow. I was walking as the owner of my own life. Behind me I could hear Sarah arguing with Robert in whispers turning into anger. But I did not stop. Because everything I had once lost in silence was finally being returned through truth. And tomorrow would bring the final chapter. The house felt different after the meeting. Not physically. The walls were still polished. The chandeliers still sparkled. The furniture still looked expensive and untouched. But something inside it had shifted. It no longer belonged to them. It belonged to truth now. Robert did not speak to me that night. Neither did Sarah. They stayed upstairs in what used to be their comfort zone but now felt like borrowed space. I could hear them moving things around, arguing in low voices and opening drawers too loudly as if noise could fix reality. I stayed in the living room alone. For the first time I did not feel like I was hiding. I sat on Arthur's old armchair and looked at the fireplace. The same fireplace where he used to sit after long days when the company was falling apart. Back then he looked tired all the time. But I remember something clearly. Every time he looked at me there was relief in his eyes. Like I was the only place where he could rest. I closed my eyes for a moment. And I finally understood something I had ignored for years. I was never just supporting his life. I was holding it together. Upstairs a door slammed. Then footsteps came down the stairs. Robert appeared in the doorway. He looked different now. Not powerful. Not angry. Just empty. "Mom," he said quietly. That word again. But this time it did not feel like control or demand. It felt like loss. I looked at him but did not answer immediately. He stepped closer. "I did not know," he said. "About everything you did." I stayed silent. He ran a hand through his hair. "I thought Dad built everything. I thought I was entitled to it. I never asked how it survived." His voice broke slightly at the end. For a moment the arrogance was gone. And what remained was a boy who had never been taught gratitude. Sarah appeared behind him in the hallway. Her expression was no longer confident. It was scared. "We need to fix this," she said quickly. "We can apologize. We can talk to lawyers. We can work something out." I looked at her calmly. "No, Sarah. There is nothing to fix. Only something to accept." She shook her head. "This is our life." I answered softly. "It was your life inside my sacrifice." Silence followed. Robert sat down slowly on the bottom step of the stairs. For the first time he looked at the house not like an owner, but like someone losing something he never truly earned. "I did not respect you," he said quietly. I nodded slightly. "I know." A long pause filled the room. Then he looked up at me. "What happens now?" I stood up from the armchair. For the first time in decades my voice did not hesitate. "Now you leave." Sarah's eyes widened instantly. Robert did not argue. He just nodded slowly like he already knew that answer was coming. "I understand," he said. But I could see he did not fully understand. Not yet. He still thought loss was temporary. But some consequences stay permanent. The next morning the house was quiet. Too quiet. No arguments. No rushing footsteps. No expensive perfume in the air. Just silence and the sound of boxes being carried down the stairs. They did not look at me much while they packed. Sarah avoided my eyes completely. Robert stopped once in front of the dining table where everything had begun. He stood there for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I am sorry. It was not perfect. It was not enough. But it was real." I gave a small nod. That was all I could give. By noon the driveway was empty. Their cars were gone. Their voices were gone. Even their presence felt like it had never existed. I stood at the front door watching the final truck disappear down the road. The same road Arthur used to drive home on every evening. Then I slowly closed the door. The sound echoed through the house. And for the first time it felt peaceful. Not lonely. Peaceful. Days passed. The mansion changed slowly. Not into something new, but into something honest. I removed the sticky notes Sarah had placed everywhere. I uncovered the original furniture. I opened windows that had been kept shut for too long. Light returned to rooms that had forgotten what it felt like. One afternoon, Mr. Sterling came by one last time. He handed me final paperwork confirming full ownership transfer completion. Everything was now legally mine without condition. He looked at me before leaving. "Arthur would be proud of how you handled everything," he said quietly. I nodded. "I hope so." After he left, I walked through every room again. Not as someone reclaiming property, but as someone remembering her own life. Each corner carried memories. Some painful, some beautiful. All mine. That evening I stood in the garden. The wind was soft. The sky was orange. For the first time in many years, I did not feel like I was surviving anything. I felt like I had finally arrived at myself. No noise. No disrespect. No invisibility. Just quiet truth. And then I spoke softly into the wind. I am still here. Not as a ghost. Not as a burden. But as the woman who built everything they tried to claim. Later I opened a small foundation in Arthur's name. But the truth was simple. It was also in my name. A place for women who were never seen but always carried everything. Women who were told they were nothing, but were actually everything. On the gate of the house I placed a small wooden sign. It read, "This house was funded by a burden." And that burden finally became free. I stood there for a long time looking at it. Then I smiled. Not because I won, but because I was finally no longer erased. And before the screen fades, I just want to say thank you for watching. If this story touched you even a little, please like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories like this. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is in your country. Until the next story, remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who built the whole room.